Welcome back to another chilling episode where we delve into the shadows of real-life horrors. Tonight, we're exploring 3 terrifying true stories from people who, as children, were left home alone, only to face nightmares that no kid should ever endure. These aren't made-up tales. They're genuine accounts submitted by survivors who still wake up in cold sweats years later. If you're listening in the dark, or perhaps alone in your own home right now, I suggest you double-check those doors and windows. You never know what's lurking just beyond the threshold. Let's dive into the fear. Starting with our first story. Story 1. The whisper in the house. This unsettling experience comes from a man who we'll call Alex back in the early 2000s, when he was just 12 years old. Alex lived in a cozy 2-story house in a sleepy suburban neighborhood outside of Chicago, the kind of place where kids rode bikes until dusk, and crime was something you only saw on the evening news. His parents, both working professionals, had always been protective. But on this particular Friday night, they decided it was time to give him a taste of independence. They were heading out for a dinner date with friends, nothing fancy. Just a local Italian spot, and they figured Alex was mature enough to handle a few hours solo. Lock the doors, don't answer for strangers, and call us if anything feels off. His mom reminded him as they kissed him goodbye. Alex nodded eagerly, his mind already racing with plans. Pizza delivery, unlimited video games on the PlayStation, and maybe sneaking in a horror movie he'd been dying to watch. The evening started perfectly. The pizza arrived hot and cheesy around 7 p.m., and Alex devoured it while blasting through levels of his favorite game in the living room. The house felt alive with the sounds of pixelated explosions and his own triumphant cheers. By 9 p.m., as the sun dipped below the horizon and the streetlights flickered on outside, he migrated upstairs to his bedroom, the one at the end of the hallway with posters of superheroes plastered on the walls. His parents had texted him, "Having fun? Be home by 11. He replied with a thumbs-up emoji, feeling like a king in his castle. But around 10 p.m., as the house settled into that eerie quiet that only empty homes can produce, the faint hum of the refrigerator downstairs, the occasional creak of settling wood, something shifted. Alex was deeply engrossed in his game, headphones on when he thought he heard a murmur. He paused the game, sliding one ear cup off. Silence. Shrugging it off as his imagination, he resumed playing. But then it came again, a faint whisper drifting up from somewhere below. It was low, almost inaudible, like wind through a cracked window, but distinctly human. A man's voice, gravelly and deliberate. "I'm in the house." Alex's heart skipped a beat. He froze, controller slipping from his sweaty palms. "Wasite televisión no." He'd turned it off hours ago. The neighbors, their houses were too far away for voices to carry like that. He strained his ears, and there it was once more. "I'm coming. ... Up. Up." The words slithered through the air, sending a chill down his spine that made his skin prickle. Panic set in. This couldn't be real. He grabbed his flip phone from the nightstand. Cell phones, back then, weren't smartphones, just basic caller's hand, darted into his closet, pulling the door shut behind him. Huddled among hanging clothes and forgotten toys, he tried to steady his breathing, but his chest heaved like he'd run a marathon. Minutes ticked by in agonizing slowness. He debated calling his parents, but what if it was nothing? They'd think he was a baby. Then ... footsteps. Not the light patter of a family member, but heavy, deliberate thuds echoing from the staircase. Creak ... Creak ... Each one louder than the last, ascending toward the second floor. Alex's mind raced with horrific possibilities. A burglar? Escaped convict. Something worse. He dialed 911, his voice a trembling whisper as he explained to the operator. "Someone's in my house. They're coming upstairs. Please hurry." The footsteps halted right outside his bedroom door. Alex could hear breathing now rugged, uneven through the thin wood. The doorknob rattled, twisting slowly as if testing the lock. Thank God he'd locked it earlier out of habit. A soft thud against the door, like a shoulder pressing in. Then nothing. Absolute silence. broken only by Alex's muffled sobs into his sleeve. The police arrived what felt like an eternity later, actually, about 15 minutes. Sirens blaring as they pulled up. Alex emerged from the closet when he heard the officers calling his name. They searched every inch of the house. Closets, under beds, the attic crawlspace. No one was there. No signs of forced entry at the front or back doors. But in the basement, tucked away behind the laundry room, they discovered a small window barely big enough for a person to squeeze through pried open from the outside. The latch was bent, fresh scratches on the frame, and on the kitchen counter, right next to where Alex's pizza box still sat, was a single muddy handprint. It hadn't been there when he ate. The print was large, adult-sized, with dirt that matched the soil from the backyard. The investigation revealed no suspects. The intruder must have fled before the cops arrived. Alex's parents rushed home, horrified, and from that night on, they never left him alone again until he was in high school. Even now, as an adult with his own family, Alex installs extra locks on every window and door. And on quiet nights, when the house is empty, he swears he can still hear that whisper echoing in his mind. I'm in the house. A reminder that safety is just an illusion. That was just the beginning. Our next story takes us to a more isolated setting, where the darkness outside hides unimaginable threats. Story 2. The Dog at the Door. This one is shared by a woman named Sarah, who experienced it when she was around 9 or 10 years old in the late 1990s. Sarah grew up in a rural part of upstate New York, where houses were spaced acres apart, surrounded by dense woods that stretched for miles. It was beautiful during the day and less adventures in the trees, but at night, the isolation turned sinister. The nearest neighbor was a 10-minute drive away, and cell service was spotty at best. Her family had a large Bernese mountain dog named Max, a gentle giant who was more of a cuddly companion than a guard dog. He spent most evenings lounging inside, but on this fateful night, Sarah's parents had let him out into the fenced yard to roam before they left for a community event, a church fundraiser or something similar. "We'll be back by 9, sweetie," her dad said, ruffling her hair. "Watch some cartoons, eat your snacks, and let Max in if he barks." Sarah, thrilled at the rare alone time, waved them off from the porch. She settled on the living room couch with a bowl of popcorn, flipping through channels on the old tube TV. The house was warm and inviting, lit by lamps that cast cozy shadows. Outside, the autumn wind rustled the leaves, and crickets chirped in the distance. Around 8 p.m. as dusk fully enveloped the property, Sarah started to doze off, the glow of the screen lulling her into a half-sleep. That's when the barking started. It wasn't Max's usual playful woof. This was ferocious, frantic, a deep, guttural barrage that shattered the peace. Sarah bolted upright, heart racing. Max never barked like that. He was the type to greet strangers with tail wags. She hurried to the sliding glass door at the back of the house, peering into the inky blackness of the yard. The motion light hadn't triggered yet, so all she could see was the vague outline of trees swaying in the wind. But there was Max, pressed against the glass, his massive frame his fur stood on end like spikes, ears pinned back, teeth bared in a snarl that revealed glistening fangs. He was barking madly at something out there, something Sarah couldn't see. Instinctively, she unlocked the door and slid it open just enough to call him in. "Max, come here, boy." But instead of bounding inside as usual, Max lunged through the opening and physically shoved her backward with his shoulder, nearly knocking her off her feet. He positioned himself squarely between her and the door, legs planted wide, a low, rumbling growl emanating from his chest that vibrated through the floorboards. Sarah stumbled back, fear gripping her like icy fingers. She'd never seen him like this protective, almost aggressive toward the outside world. For what felt like an eternity, probably 5 or 6 agonizing minutes, Max held his ground, eyes locked on the darkness beyond the glass. Sarah didn't dare move closer. She backed into the kitchen, grabbing a cordless phone from the wall, ready to dial her parents' pager. No sounds came from outside, no footsteps, no rustling beyond the wind, but Max's growl persisted, hackles raised, as if whatever was out there was still watching, waiting. Sarah's mind flooded with terrors. A bear, a wolf, or worse, a person lurking in the shadows, eyeing the isolated house with a lone child inside. Finally, the growling subsided. Max shook himself off, turned to Sarah with a whine, and licked her hand as if to say, "It's gone now." She slammed the door shut, locked it, and pulled the curtains tight. When her parents returned around 9:30, she tearfully recounted everything. They searched the yard with flashlights, nothing. No animal tracks in the soft earth. No signs of intrusion. The fence was intact, but Sarah knew deep down that Max had sensed something malevolent. A few weeks later, local news reported a string of break-ins in the area homes targeted when families were out, with reports of a shadowy figure scouting properties at night. Max passed away years ago, but Sarah credits him with saving her life that evening. She now lives in the city, far from those woods, but she always keeps a dog by her side. And on windy nights, when branches scratch against windows, she remembers that growl and wonders what horror Max scared away. We've got one more tale to send shivers down your spine. This one proves that danger doesn't always wait for the cover of night. Story 3. The Man Who Needed a Pen. Our final story is from a guy named Jake, who was 13 at the time this happened in the summer of 2010. Jake lived in a modest home on a quiet cul-de-sac in a mid-sized town in Texas. His parents were running errands at afternoon grocery shopping, picking up dry cleaning, and, since it was broad daylight, they felt comfortable leaving him alone for a couple of hours. "Stay inside, keep the doors locked, and we'll bring back ice cream," his mom promised. Jake, a typical teen, was ecstatic. No supervision meant diving into online gaming marathons without interruptions. He set up in the living room, controller in hand, the air conditioner humming against the sweltering heat outside. The neighborhood was peaceful. Kids played basketball down the street. Cars occasionally passed by. Around those p.m., as Jake was in the middle of an intense match, there came a knock at the front door. Firm, insistent, he paused his game and crept to the window, peeking through the blinds. Standing on the porch was a man he didn't recognize. Mid-40s, disheveled with unkempt hair, wearing faded jeans and a stained t-shirt. He looked sweaty, agitated, glancing around nervously. Jake's parents had drilled it into him. Never open the door for strangers. So he stayed silent, hoping the man would leave. But the knocking persisted, growing louder, more urgent. Then, to Jake's horror, the doorknob turned, and the door swung open. It hadn't been locked. His dad must have forgotten in the rush to leave. The man stepped inside without hesitation, his boots tracking dirt onto the entryway rug. He scanned the room, eyes widening slightly when he spotted Jake frozen on the couch. Jake's mind screamed to run, to scream, but terror paralyzed him. The man didn't charge or threaten. Instead, he muttered, I just need a pen." His voice was shaky, almost pleading, but his eyes darted around the room, taking in valuables, the TV, the gaming console. He strode purposefully into the kitchen, as if he knew the layout, and rifled through the desk drawer where the family kept office supplies. Grabbing a cheap ballpoint pen, he pocketed it and turned back toward the door. The whole intrusion lasted maybe 30 seconds, but to Jake, it felt like hours. He managed a weak, "Who are you?" But the man ignored him, simply nodding as he exited, pulling the door shut behind him with a soft click. Jake bolted to lock it, then hid in the bathroom, shaking uncontrollably as he called his parents. They raced home, and the police were summoned immediately. The cops took Jake's description and canvassed the neighborhood. It turned out the man was a known local prowler, with a history of petty theft and home invasions. He'd been spotted casing houses in the area, targeting those that appeared empty. The pen excuse, a ruse to test if anyone was home or to grab something quick if confronted. If Jake hadn't been there, the man might have ransacked the place, or waited for nightfall to return. Worse, neighbors later mentioned seeing a similar figure lurking around backyards days prior. Jake's family installed a security system the very next week, complete with cameras and alarms. But the psychological scar remained. For years, Jake couldn't be alone without triple-checking locks. And even now, as a father himself, he teaches his kids the same vigilance. The scariest part, he says, wasn't the intrusion itself, it was how casually the man entered, like the home was his for the taking. A stark reminder that daylight offers no protection from the predators among us. Long pause with fading music, perhaps a door creaking shut in the background. Well, folks, That's all for tonight's dive into the abyss. 3 true stories of childhood solitude turned into sheer nightmare fuel. If these tales have you glancing over your shoulder, remember, they're real. And they could happen to anyone. If you've got your own bone-chilling experience from being home alone as a kid, drop it in the comments or send it my way. I might feature it next time. Until then, stay vigilant, keep those lights on, and never underestimate the darkness. Good night, and sweet dreams.